My name is Maya. I'm 26 years old, and 3 days before my master's defense, my stepfather destroyed everything I'd worked for. He grabbed my research notes and threw them into the fireplace while screaming that I was wasting his money on useless dreams. I watched 2 years of work turn to ash as my mother stood frozen in the doorway. Smart girls end up alone, he snarled. His face twisted with rage. Nobody wants a woman who thinks she's better than everyone else. Growing up in Riverside felt like living in a fishbowl. Everyone knew everyone's business in our small mountain town. Our cramped apartment above the auto repair shop smelled permanently of motor oil and disappointment. The peeling wallpaper told the story of dreams deferred too many times. My stepfather, Marcus, ran the garage below our home. He'd married my mother when I was 8, bringing his own brand of bitter wisdom into our lives. College is for rich kids, he'd announce whenever I brought home good grades. Real people learn trades that actually matter. Mom worked double shifts at the local hospital as a nursing assistant. She'd come home exhausted, her scrubs stained with other people's pain. When Marcus spoke, she nodded along like a bobblehead doll too tired to fight battles she couldn't win. Your mother agrees with me, he'd say when I questioned his views. Tell her Sarah. Tell Maya how education ruined your sister's life. Mom would look away and mumble something about how Aunt Rachel's college debt never got paid off. My older sister Emma had learned early to stay invisible. She married her high school boyfriend at 19 and moved 2 towns over. Don't rock the boat, she'd whisper during her rare visits. It's easier when you just agree with everything he says. But I couldn't agree. Something inside me rebelled against their small dreams and smaller expectations. Books became my escape route. Math problems were puzzles waiting to be solved. Science experiments in my bedroom made me lose track of time until Marcus would pound on the door, demanding I stop wasting electricity. Mrs. Patterson, my 5th-grade teacher, first noticed something different about me. Maya has exceptional analytical abilities, she told my parents during conferences. Marcus stared at his phone the entire time while Mom nodded politely and forgot everything before we reached the parking lot. By middle school, I was tutoring other students. The librarian, Miss Chen, would slip me books she thought I'd enjoy. Knowledge is power, she'd whisper conspiratorially. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. High school became my sanctuary. I joined debate team honor society and spent every free moment in the library. My chemistry teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, stayed after school to help me prepare for advanced placement exams. You have a gift, he'd say. Don't waste it. When I earned valedictorian, the principal personally called to invite my family to graduation. They didn't come. Marcus had planned a fishing trip, and Mom claimed she had to work an extra shift. I delivered my speech to a crowd of strangers fighting tears when other graduates ran to hug their proud families. Mr. Rodriguez appeared afterward with a small wrapped package. Inside was a notebook with an inscription, "The world needs your mind. Don't let anyone dim your light." That night, I made a secret promise. I would be the first person in my family to graduate college. I applied for scholarships in secret using school computers since we didn't have internet at home. I created an email address my parents would never discover and convinced teachers to serve as contacts to avoid mail coming to our apartment. While classmates celebrated acceptance letters with supportive families, I hid mine in a shoebox under my bed. I'd read them by flashlight tracing university logos like maps to another world. The day I told them about my full scholarship to State University, the silence lasted forever. Then Marcus exploded. So you think you're too good for honest work, too good for your family? Mom just stared at her hands while Emma, visiting that weekend, laughed nervously and said, Maya always was the weird one. I packed my few belongings that night knowing I was crossing a bridge that would burn behind me. Each item I placed in my suitcase felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd never understood existed. College orientation felt like stepping onto an alien planet. Families helped unload cars packed with dorm supplies. Mothers fussed over room arrangements while fathers assembled furniture. I arrived alone on a Greyhound bus with one suitcase containing everything I owned. My scholarship covered tuition and basic housing, but nothing else. No laptop, no spending money, no supplies. Your parents coming later? My roommate Jessica asked while her mother organized their shared closet space. They had to work. I lied. The first of many lies I'd tell over the next 4 years. The truth was too complicated, too painful to explain to strangers whose parents hugged them goodbye with tears of pride. That first semester nearly broke me. Without a laptop, I lived in the PEG computer lab typing papers while other students worked comfortably from their rooms. The financial aid office helped me find work study in the dining hall, but the hours were limited and the pay barely covered essentials. I found a second job waiting tables at Danny's Diner downtown, working nights and weekends while maintaining the GPA required for my scholarship. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Coffee became my best friend. 4 weeks into October, my carefully planned budget collapsed when I got the flu. The health center visit and medication wiped out my savings completely. With nowhere else to turn, I swallowed my pride and called home. Maya, Mom's voice sounded surprised. Is everything okay? Are you finally ready to come home and be reasonable? I'm a little short this month, I explained, hating how small my voice sounded. I got sick and had some medical bills. Could I maybe borrow $50 until my next paycheck? The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Then Marcus grabbed the phone. Money problems already? Welcome to the real world, college girl. Maybe now you'll understand what responsibility actually looks like. He hung up without another word. That night, I slept in my car for the first time, unable to afford both medication and my share of the dorm utilities. Jessica was at a sorority party, so I made excuses about staying with a study group. For a week, I alternated between my Honda's back seat and the 24-hour library, showering in the gym before classes. Nobody noticed. I became a ghost drifting through campus, just another tired student among thousands. Thanksgiving break arrived like a blessing. Most students went home, but I picked up extra shifts at the diner. The holiday pay and generous tips from customers who felt sorry for the poor college girl working on Turkey Day helped me rent a tiny studio apartment off campus. The neighborhood wasn't great, but it was mine. No roommate asking awkward questions, no family photos reminding me what I'd given up. Just 4 walls and the freedom to study without judgment. Despite everything, I excelled academically. Professor Williams, who taught Introduction to Psychology, became my first real mentor. After I submitted a paper analyzing how economic stress affects family relationships, she asked me to stay after class. This work shows remarkable insight, she said. Have you considered psychology as your major? That conversation changed everything. Psychology gave me tools to understand my own experiences. The more I studied family systems and trauma responses, the more I recognized patterns in my upbringing. Knowledge became healing, not just escape. By sophomore year, I'd found my rhythm. Classes in the morning, library sessions in the afternoon, work in the evening, homework until dawn. I survived on ramen noodles, free campus event food, and the occasional meal professors bought during office hour discussions. I learned which buildings had the best heating in winter and air conditioning in summer to minimize utility bills. I discovered that the graduate student lounge had a coffee machine that nobody monitored too closely. Small victories kept me going. Junior year brought a research assistant position with Professor Davis in the psychology department. The pay was better than food service, and the work fed my soul in ways slinging hash never could. Your perspective on socioeconomic factors and family psychology is unusually mature, she explained when she hired me. Most students your age only understand these issues theoretically. If only she knew how personally I understood them. Each theory I studied illuminated another piece of my family puzzle. Each research paper gave me language for experiences I'd only felt before. My own family became my most intimate case study, though I kept that connection carefully hidden behind academic language. Senior year, I discovered my true passion, studying how family environments shape educational outcomes. The irony wasn't lost on me that my own toxic family had become the foundation of my academic interests. I graduated summa cum laude with departmental honors. Several professors encouraged graduate school applications, offering glowing recommendations. When my acceptance letter arrived with a graduate assistantship covering most expenses, I felt vindicated. In a moment of weakness, I called home with the news. I got into graduate school, I told Mom, trying to keep pride from my voice. Full funding and a teaching position. Oh, she paused. More school. When do you plan to get a real job and settle down like Emma? Marcus must have been listening because his voice cut in sharp as glass. The professional student strikes again. Some of us started working at 16, but I guess that's beneath the professor wannabe. I ended the call, quickly reminding myself why I'd limited contact. Some part of me had still hoped for approval, for acknowledgement that my accomplishments mattered. That hope felt naive now, like expecting roses to bloom in concrete. Graduate school meant finding housing near campus again. The teaching stipend would cover basics, but barely. After calculating costs, I made a decision that would change everything. I'd rent a cheap apartment back in Riverside, 20 minutes from campus. The rent was half of what university housing cost, and I could manage the commute. I told myself it was purely financial, but maybe some foolish part of me still yearned for family connection for the approval I'd never received. Graduate school intensified everything. The coursework was brutal expectations, sky-high competition fierce. But for the first time, I felt truly in my element. My undergraduate struggles had prepared me in ways my privileged classmates were just beginning to understand. My focus sharpened on family psychology, specifically how parental attitudes toward education affect children's achievement and self-worth. Every paper I wrote circled this theme, examining it from different angles. Most students approach these topics academically. Professor Martinez commented on one of my papers. Your analysis shows deep understanding of the lived experience. She had no idea how deep that understanding ran, how every statistic reflected moments from my childhood, how every case study contained echoes of my story. The apartment I found in Riverside was perfect for my budget. Small, quiet, and exactly 23 minutes from campus. I convinced myself this was about money, nothing more. The fact that I'd be living in the same town as my family was purely coincidental. That's what I told myself anyway. Sometimes we lie to ourselves more convincingly than we lie to others. Moving back to Riverside felt like stepping into a time machine. The same cracked sidewalks, the same faded storefronts, the same smell of motor oil drifting up from Marcus's garage. Nothing had changed except me. My apartment was a studio above the old bakery on Main Street. Mrs. Rodriguez, who owned the building, gave me a discount because I'd tutored her grandson years earlier. You always were the smart one, she said with a knowing smile. Don't let anyone tell you different. The first month went surprisingly well. I established a routine of leaving early for campus and returning late, minimizing contact with my family. I'd see Marcus occasionally when I drove past the garage, but he'd just glare and turn away. Mom stopped by unexpectedly one evening carrying a casserole dish. Thought you might be hungry, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. It's good to have you close again, even if you're still chasing those degrees. I accepted the food, gratefully, hope flickering dangerously in my chest. Maybe time had softened their edges. Maybe my success would finally earn their respect. The casserole was delicious, just like I remembered from childhood. My thesis research was progressing beautifully. I'd chosen to study educational resilience in first-generation college students, focusing on family dynamics and coping mechanisms. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was essentially studying myself, but I kept that connection buried beneath academic language. Professor Martinez had approved my proposal enthusiastically. This research addresses a critical gap in our understanding, she'd said. Your methodology is sound and your insights are remarkably nuanced. I conducted interviews with 20 students whose stories echoed my own. Each conversation lasted hours, revealing the complex ways families could both inspire and sabotage their children's dreams. The data was rich, compelling, and heartbreaking. One participant, a young man named Carlos, broke down during our interview. My dad calls my engineering degree fancy paper, he sobbed. Says I'm getting too big for my britches. I just wanted to make him proud. Another student, Jennifer, described how her mother sabotaged every study session with sudden family emergencies. It's like she can't stand seeing me succeed at something she never tried, Jennifer observed with painful clarity. Their stories validated my own experiences while breaking my heart. I wasn't alone in this struggle. Thousands of students face the same impossible choice between family loyalty and personal growth. As my research deepened, so did tensions at home. Marcus began making pointed comments about my car being parked downtown too often. Some of us work real jobs during the day, he'd mutter when we crossed paths at the grocery store. Mom's casseroles came with increasingly loaded comments. Emma's pregnant again, she'd announce. Third grandchild I'll actually get to know, unlike some people who are too busy studying to visit family. The guilt was intentional and effective. I started making more effort to connect, stopping by for Sunday dinners and helping with household repairs. Each visit felt like walking through a minefield, never knowing when I'd step on something explosive. Emma visited one weekend with her 2 toddlers. She looked exhausted, her eyes dull with the resignation I remembered from our teenage years. Must be nice to have all that freedom, she said, watching me grade papers at the kitchen table. You could go back to school too, I suggested gently. Community college has great programs. I could help with applications. Her laugh was bitter. With what money? What time? Some of us live in the real world, Maya. We can't all be professional students forever. The words stung because they echoed every criticism I'd heard growing up. Even Emma, who used to encourage my dreams, had absorbed their toxic narrative. Success had isolated me from the only family I'd ever known. Marcus's interference escalated as my defense date approached. He'd call during my study sessions with sudden urgent needs for help at the garage. Family comes first, he'd say when I protested. Or did college teach you to forget where you came from? Mom joined the campaign with passive-aggressive precision. She'd schedule family events during my research interviews, then act hurt when I couldn't attend. You used to care about family, she'd sigh dramatically. The pressure mounted as my thesis deadline approached. I was working 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. My research was groundbreaking, my analysis sharp, my writing clear. This wasn't just a thesis, it was my manifesto, my proof that their narrow vision of my worth was wrong. 3 weeks before my defense, everything started unraveling. My car broke down, forcing expensive repairs I couldn't afford. My laptop began overheating, randomly threatening months of work. The stress was eating me alive. I made the mistake of venting to Mom during one of her visits. I'm just overwhelmed, I admitted. The defense is coming up and everything feels like it's falling apart. Her response chilled me. Maybe this is a sign, she said carefully. Maybe you're pushing too hard for something that isn't meant to be. There's no shame in admitting you've gone as far as you can go. The suggestion that I should quit, that I should accept defeat when victory was so close, ignited something dangerous inside me. I'm not quitting, I said firmly. This matters too much. Her smile was sad and knowing. That's what your father always said about his big dreams. Look how that turned out. She was comparing me to my biological father, who'd left when I was 6, chasing get-rich-quick schemes that never materialized. The comparison was cruel and deliberate. She wanted me to doubt myself, to see ambition as a character flaw rather than a strength. That night, I worked until dawn, fueled by rage and determination. My thesis was 90% complete. Just formatting and final revisions remained. I had 72 hours until the submission deadline. I was going to make it. Despite every obstacle they'd placed in my path, despite every moment of sabotage and discouragement, I was going to succeed. The future they claimed I didn't deserve was within my grasp, but I underestimated how far they were willing to go to prove themselves right. The morning of my thesis deadline started with deceptive calm. I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, surviving on black coffee and sheer willpower. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but triumph felt within reach. Just 3 hours until the noon submission deadline. I'd spread my research notes across every surface of my tiny apartment. 2 years of interviews, analysis, and insights lay organized in careful stacks. My laptop hummed steadily, processing the final document that would complete my master's degree. The first warning sign came at 8 a.m. when Marcus appeared at my door unannounced. He never visited my apartment. Ever. His presence immediately set off alarm bells, but I was too exhausted to think clearly. Heard you're finishing up today, Bustina, he said, pushing past me without ambition. His eyes scanned my workspace with obvious disdain. Lot of papers for something nobody will ever read. Good morning to you too, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. I really need to focus right now. The deadline is in 4 hours. He ignored my hint, settling into my only chair like he owned the place. Your mother's worried about you. Says you've been acting strange lately. Antisocial. I bit back the obvious response. Of course I'd been antisocial. I was completing a graduate thesis while working part-time and managing their constant interference. I'm fine, I said instead. Just busy. Busy. He said the word like it tasted bitter. You know what busy looks like? Busy is working a real job, supporting a family, contributing to society. Not playing student at 26 years old. The familiar criticism washed over me like background noise. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life. Today it barely registered as I continued formatting my references. Mom arrived 20 minutes later carrying grocery bags. Thought I'd make you breakfast, she announced, beginning to unpack food onto my small counter. You're too skinny. All this stress isn't healthy. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I really can't take a break right now. The submission system closes at noon and I still have final formatting to complete. She paused, a carton of eggs in her hand. Surely you can spare 10 minutes for family. We hardly see you anymore. The irony was staggering. For weeks they'd complained about my presence in town. Now suddenly family time was urgent precisely when my deadline loomed largest. After I submit, I promised. We can have a nice dinner tonight to celebrate. Marcus snorted. Celebrate what? Finishing homework? Most people celebrate real achievements. Promotions, marriages, grandchildren. The dig about grandchildren was aimed directly at my heart. At 26, I was officially the family failure for prioritizing education over reproduction. Emma had provided 3 grandchildren by this age. I'd provided only disappointment. I tried to tune them out, focusing intently on my computer screen. Every minute of distraction was a minute lost, and the deadline was absolute. Universities didn't grant extensions for family drama. At 10 a.m., Emma arrived with her youngest child. The apartment instantly filled with toddler chaos toys, scattered cartoon videos, blaring snacks crushed into my carpet. "Hope you don't mind," Emma said cheerfully. Daycare was closed and I needed to run errands. "This isn't really a good time," I said, my voice strained with barely controlled panic. "I have 2 hours left to finish this." "Kids are part of life," Marcus declared. "About time you learned that. Real women balance family responsibilities with their hobbies." Hobbies. He'd called my master's thesis a hobby. The insult was so profound I actually stopped typing. "This isn't a hobby," I said quietly. "This is my career, my future, my contribution to human knowledge." Emma laughed while chasing her toddler away from my research stacks. "Human knowledge? It's a paper about family problems? Seems pretty obvious stuff to me." Their dismissiveness was breathtaking. 2 years of rigorous research methodology analysis reduced to obvious stuff by people who'd never read a single academic paper in their lives. At 11 a.m., with 60 minutes remaining, Marcus escalated his interference. "Need help moving some equipment at the garage," he announced. "Won't take long." "I cannot leave right now," I said firmly. "I have 1 hour until this deadline. 1 hour." His face darkened with the dangerous expression I remembered from childhood. "Your family needs help, and you're worried about homework deadlines shows where your priorities really are." Mom placed her hand on my shoulder with deceptive gentleness. "Maybe this pressure isn't healthy, honey. Maybe it's time to consider other options." The suggestion that I abandon everything so close to completion was monstrous. They wanted me to fail. Not just this thesis, but everything I'd worked toward. They needed me to fail to validate their own limited choices. "I'm not quitting," I said, my voice shaking with exhaustion and fury. "Not when I'm this close." "Close to what?" Marcus stood looming over my workspace. "A piece of paper that qualifies you for nothing, while real people work real jobs." Emma joined the attack from the other side. "Maya, you're 26 years old, living alone in a studio apartment. Don't you want a normal life? A husband, children, stability." They surrounded me like wolves circling wounded prey. Every word was calculated to undermine my confidence, to make me doubt the path I'd chosen. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordinated sabotage. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Mom looked genuinely shocked. "Get out!" I screamed, months of suppressed rage finally exploding. "All of you, get out of my apartment right now." Marcus's face contorted with fury. "Don't you dare raise your voice to your mother." "She's not my mother today," I snapped back. "Mothers support their children's dreams. They don't actively sabotage them." The silence that followed was electric with tension. I'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But I was beyond caring about their feelings when they'd shown such complete disregard for mine. "Your research," Marcus said slowly, his voice dangerously calm. He moved toward my carefully organized notes. "Let's see what's so important." "Don't touch those," I warned, stepping between him and my work. But he was bigger, stronger, and angrier than I'd ever seen him. He shoved me aside and grabbed a stack of interview transcripts, months of irreplaceable work representing 20 students' most intimate stories. "These are confidential," I pleaded. "Those are real people's private experiences." "Real people." He laughed bitterly. "Like you'd know anything about real people." And then he did the unthinkable. He walked to the fireplace I'd never used and threw my research into the cold ashes. Before I could react, he'd grabbed matches from my kitchen drawer. "Your future," he said, striking a match. "That's a joke. You don't deserve a future. You're just a burden who thinks she's better than everyone else." The match fell. My life's work began to burn. I watched 2 years of my life turn to ash. The flames consumed interview transcripts, statistical analyses, and theoretical frameworks I'd spent months developing. 20 students had trusted me with their most painful stories, and now those stories were literally going up in smoke. "Stop!" I lunged toward the fireplace, but Marcus blocked my path with his body. The heat from the flames felt insignificant compared to the rage burning inside my chest. There, he said with satisfaction, watching my research curl and blacken. Now maybe you'll focus on what actually matters. Mom stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale but her silence deafening. Emma clutched her toddler closer, backing toward the exit. Even they seemed shocked by how far he'd gone. You have no idea what you just destroyed, I whispered, my voice shaking with fury and disbelief. Those were real people's stories, students who trusted me with their trauma, 2 years of research. Mine. Good, Marcus sneered. Maybe now you'll stop playing therapist and get a real job. The casual cruelty of his response broke something fundamental inside me. This wasn't just about my thesis anymore. This was about every achievement they'd dismissed, every dream they'd mocked, every moment they'd chosen destruction over support. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I need to report a crime, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Someone just destroyed thousands of dollars worth of research materials. Marcus's face went white. You wouldn't dare call the police on family. Watch me, I replied, giving the dispatcher my address. And get out of my apartment before they arrive. Maya, please. Mom finally spoke, her voice pleading. Let's just calm down and talk about this. No need to involve outsiders. Outsiders? I laughed bitterly. You mean people who actually care about justice? People who don't think destroying someone's life work is acceptable family bonding? Emma pushed past everyone, heading for the door. I'm not staying for this drama, she muttered. Come on, Mom, let's go. But Marcus wasn't finished. You ungrateful little brat, he snarled, stepping closer. After everything we've done for you. The roof over your head, the food in your mouth, the constant criticism, I interrupted. The sabotage, the emotional abuse. Thank you so much for that wonderful childhood gift. His hand shot out toward my laptop, which still contained my digital files. In that moment, I realized he wasn't done destroying things. He wanted to finish what he'd started. I dove for the computer, but he was faster. His fingers closed around the screen, and for a terrifying second, I thought he'd destroy that too. Instead, he held it just out of reach, his eyes gleaming with malicious power. Want your precious computer back, he taunted. Maybe if you ask nicely, maybe if you admit this whole education thing was a mistake. Give it back, I said quietly, my voice deadly calm. Now. Or what you'll call the police again. Think they care about family disputes. That's when I heard the sirens. 2 patrol cars pulled up outside, their lights flashing through my windows. Marcus's confident expression faltered slightly. Last chance, he said desperately. Apologize for the disrespect and we'll pretend this never happened. I walked to the door and opened it for the officers. Never, I said simply. The next hour passed in a blur of official statements and evidence documentation. The officers photographed the burned remains in my fireplace, took pictures of my destroyed notes, and listened carefully as I explained what had happened. Officer Chen, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, seemed particularly interested in the research aspect. These were academic materials for your graduate thesis. 2 years of work, I confirmed. Interview transcripts from 20 participants, statistical analyses, literature reviews, everything I needed to complete my master's degree. She nodded sympathetically. We'll include that in the report. The financial value alone makes this a serious matter. Marcus tried to minimize the situation, claiming it was just a family argument that got out of hand. She's always been dramatic, he told the officers. Makes mountains out of molehills. But the evidence spoke for itself. Thousands of dollars in research destroyed in a fit of rage. The officers took statements from everyone present, including Emma, who reluctantly admitted she'd witnessed the entire incident. He grabbed her papers and threw them in the fireplace. She said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. Maya was trying to stop him. After the police left, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the pile of ash where my future had been. The deadline had passed. Noon had come and gone while I was filing police reports and giving statements. I called to Professor Martinez with shaking hands. I won't be submitting today, I said when she answered. There's been an emergency. What kind of emergency? Are you hurt? I struggled to find words that could encompass the magnitude of what had happened. My research was destroyed. All of it. The hard copies, anyway. The silence stretched before she spoke again. Destroyed how? My stepfather burned it. I said simply. The words sounded insane even to me. Maya, where are you right now? Are you safe? Her immediate concern for my well-being, so different from my family's reaction, brought tears to my eyes. I'm home. The police have been here. I'm physically fine. Just everything's gone. Listen to me carefully, she said, her voice firm and reassuring. Come to campus immediately. Bring whatever digital files you have. We'll figure this out together. But the deadline? Forget the deadline. The university has protocols for emergencies. What happened to you absolutely qualifies. An hour later, I sat in Professor Martinez's office, my laptop open between us. The digital files were intact, but without the supporting materials, the transcripts, the detailed analyses, the coding sheets, they felt incomplete. How much can you reconstruct? She asked gently. Maybe 60%, I estimated. Some of the participants might agree to new interviews, but the statistical work is completely gone. Months of analysis. She studied my face. Maya, has he ever attacked your work before? Not destroyed it, I said. But he's always interfered, interruptions, criticism, guilt trips for putting school first. That's systematic sabotage, she said. Today crosses into criminal. Within hours after a blur of phone calls, I had a 6-week thesis extension, emergency counseling, and temporary living funds. That night with police escort, I moved into campus housing. Mom called it ridiculous. Some lines can't be uncrossed, I told her, packing my clothes. Marcus said nothing. Emma approached. I'm sorry, I should have stopped him. You should have, I replied, and drove away, no longer their daughter or their victim. In the weeks that followed, therapy named what I'd lived through, years of emotional abuse culminating in the destruction of my research. My professors rallied, participants returned for interviews, and my data, rebuilt with help, came back stronger. 4 weeks later, I submitted my thesis. I passed with distinction. The family's silence was deafening, except for Emma, who called to apologize and share her regrets. 2 weeks later, I accepted full funding for doctoral studies. A year on, I stood at a national conference presenting my expanded research. Students told me it had saved them from dropping out. I had turned my deepest pain into a tool for others. Marcus and Mom stayed unchanged, still playing victims. I kept my distance, building a chosen family of mentors, colleagues, and students. Today, as Dr. Maya Rodriguez, that scar on my wall reminds me of the day I stopped seeking their approval and started building a life worthy of my dreams. The future they said I didn't deserve, it's mine.